Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Are you having a good week?
Yes.
Thank you very much for coming to our first Sunday session. I think that I'm hoping today will be a little cooler than yesterday and maybe a little less traffic, and we can have a bit more relaxed time, but hopefully just as much fun as we did yesterday. Of course, this session is devoted to an interview with our Mangled Skyscraper awardee from last night, Director Shusuke Kaneko.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
おはようございます。
おはようございました。
Hi, go.
As you know, Mr. Kaneko has directed many films throughout his career and continues to do so, not only movie theater films, but also television films as well, and episodes on television programs, but including, of course, his breakthrough films in the kaiju community, the 3 Gamera movies. But this morning we're going to be focusing mostly on his work in the Godzilla series, namely GMK, Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters, All Out Attack. So we'll get started, and I'll ask Mr. Kaneko the obvious question, I guess. When he was growing up, was he interested in kaiju? Did he think he would be involved in the kaiju movie business? When did his interest in this begin?
So, そうですね、小学校1年生の時に、ゴジラ、キングコング対ゴジラ見ました。
It started when I was in the first grade, after I watched King Kong vs. Godzilla.
それで家帰って漫画描いたんですけど、その時はゴジラが最後勝つっていうのになったんですね。
And when I went home, I wrote a manga comic, and I made Godzilla win.
夏休みとか春休みに親と一緒にゴジラムービーを見て、ましたね。普段はテレビばっかり見てる子だったんですけどね。
And during summer and spring breaks, I would go to the movie theaters with my parents to watch Godzilla. Usually, I would just watch it on TV.
で、小学校5年生の時に、テレビシリーズでウルトラ Q が始まったんですね。それがもう本当に、毎週怪獣が現れるんで、それまでスペシャルな夏休みとか春休みとかしか見れない。毎週出てくるんですよ。びっくりしますよね。
And when I was in the 5th grade, Ultra Q began airing on TV. And before that, I was only able to watch it during the breaks. But since then, I was able to watch it every week, and that was great.
まあそれは日本の経済成長とも重なってるんですけど、で漫画も同時にどんどん、漫画の文化もね、大きくなっていく時期なんですね。でまあ6年生の時にウルトラマンが始まった頃にはもう他のいっぱい怪獣が現れて、それで整理しなきゃいけないんで怪獣実験を作りました。
And in Japan at the time, mangas were becoming much more popular. And during the 6th grade, there were a lot more kaiju films and TV shows, and I began doing kaiju experiments.
名前はベムニカっていう 辞典ベムニカ辞典
And it was called Bemunika.
辞典だっていうのかな辞典エクスペリ怪獣辞典って意味わかんない怪獣like 辞典なんだけど辞典ディクショナリー
I'm sorry, and I created a dictionary of all the kaiju characters called Bimuda.
それがベムニカって
Bemunika, I'm sorry.
だけど怪獣ビジネスっていう大人になったらなろうとかそういうふうに思ってたわけではないですね。で、子供時代にはお芝居で怪獣のお芝居やったりしてました。
When I was a child, it wasn't like I wanted to get involved in kaiju when I grew up. It was just I enjoyed watching them, and I would act the scene sometimes.
で小学校から中学高校になってくると普通のその映画ファンになって映画監督になりたいなっていうふうに思いましたけど、特にその怪獣映画を作りたいって思ってたわけじゃないんですか。
Once I entered middle school, I began becoming interested in movies and becoming a director, but I wasn't particularly thinking about making kaiju films.
一番その影響があったのは地味な戦いっていうヤクザフィルムですけど、わかります？地味な。
In particular, there was a film that sparked my interest, which was a Yakuza film called Jin.
仁義なき戦い。
The title of the movie, I don't really know, I'm sorry.
Maybe doesn't translate, or at least maybe never released, I guess, in America.
It's a Japanese title, so it's hard to translate, sorry.
Like Godfather, Japanese Yakuza.
The Japanese mafia's godfather.
Thank you. When you were first then asked to direct a Godzilla movie, of course it had followed your Gamera films so that you were well versed in the kaiju genre, but I'm wondering what was your vision for Godzilla? Because Godzilla was by that time a very well established character. What was your wish to do with Godzilla as a character that was different from before?
So ですね、85年のゴジラを見たときは結構日本はちょっとしたゴジラブームだったんですけど、それを大学の先輩の押井守さんと見て、非常にがっかりしました。
When I watched Godzilla in 1985, I watched it with my university senior, but we were quite disappointed with the movie.
で押井さんは押井さんと一緒に見た。
And the university senior is called Mr. Oshii.
で押井さんはこういうゴジラだったら、影だけでもいいんじゃないかって言ってましたね。
And Mr. Oshii said that if it's a movie like this, then it could just remain in the shadows.
それで僕はちょっとゴジラのアップが多いというふうに、そのなんかスターを撮るように、ゴジラの顔をその正面から撮るっていうショットが多いなと思ったんですよね。
I thought that there were too many close-ups of Godzilla from the front. Like there weren't much about the actors. There weren't many scenes with the actors very portrayed well.
だからまあ自分がやる場合は、その、人間の視点から見上げるモンスターっていう風にしたいなと思いましたね。
So I wanted to create something that would show more of the human perspective more than the monster's perspective.
でまあその時はまだあんまり、自分がそのゴジラ映画を撮れるっていうふうには想像してなかったんですね。
But at the time, I hadn't even imagined that I would go on to make kaiju films.
ちょっと具体的な気持ちになったのは、その大森一樹さんが、ゴジラ対ビオランテを撮った時なんですけど、まあ、大森一樹監督とは4歳ぐらいしか年が違う、4歳彼の方が上なんで、ちょっと意識したっていうことがあるんですよ。
And when Mr. Kazuki Omoni created the Godzilla versus Biolante, that really began to bring more interest in me. And I became a lot more interested in possibly making kaiju films, but he was 4 years older. He was in the field 4 years ahead of me, so I was a little bit nervous around him.
それでだからあともう、4歳が3歳年上だったら自分も候補になったらいいなっていうふうに思ったんですね、その時は。
And it felt a very great experience and honor to be able to work with someone that already has a lot of experience and is 3 to 4 years older. 大森さんが東宝の映画を、撮るっていうのはその、ちょっとハードルがあるというか、まあ自主映画から映画界に入ってきた人なんで、それまでは東宝の助監督から監督になるっていうシステムだったから。 And there were also some difficulties because Mr. Omoni, he at first created movies on his own, and to go into Toho Studios was difficult because there was a system built in where the assistant director goes up and becomes a director. So there was already a system built in which was hard to for newcomers to come in.
僕は日活っていう会社からアシスタントディレクターから監督になっていったんで、またちょっとこう系列が違うからこちらまで行くのは難しいというふうに思ってたんです。
I came through a different route. I was in a different company previously, and I was the assistant director there. And then I went on to be a director, but it was a different company, so I felt that it would be difficult to become a director of Godzilla.
だけどその後、日活を出てから東宝のアイドル映画とかを撮るようになって、でだんだん近づいていけた。
But after I left that previous company, I began making Toho's idol movies, and from there I was able to slowly get into the field.
というところからある時その大森さんが次のゴジラをやらないらしいっていう噂を聞いて、予告編にも監督の名前がついてなかったんで、富山プロデューサーにゴジラやりたいんですけどっていう年賀状にメモを書いた。
And then later on, I found out that Mr. Omoni would not be doing the part of the director of the Godzilla film. So I sent a postcard to Mr. Tomoyama stating with a memo that I would like to be the director of Godzilla.
だけどその時はもう大河原監督に決まってたんで、富山さんがいっぱいやりましょうっつってお酒をご馳走してくれたっていうことがあります。
But then he replied that the director had already been decided, but we can have a drink and talk it over, so please come over.
やってだんだん近づいていったっていう感じですかね。
And that is how I slowly got my way into doing director of Godzilla.
Godzilla became the real villain of your movie, and the enemy monsters became the defenders. That's a big change from the normal situation in a Godzilla movie. Could you talk a little bit about how that idea came about?
Gamera はその地球の守護神ということで、ヒーローだっていう映画を作ってたのが影響あったかなと思うんですけど、もうそれとは真逆の、ゴジラだったら真逆だろうっていうふうに思ったんですね。
There were already, the Gamera was already a children's ally in other shows, and that also influenced it, and I wanted to create something a little different and create a different aspect of the characters.
でも、そこに考えがまとまるまでは結構いろんなトライアンドエラーというか試行錯誤しました。
But during the process, I went through a lot of trial and error, wondering how to create a different character and how we can portray it well.
自分のその時子供が小さくて、カマキラスが好きだって言ってたから、最初カマキラスと戦わせようかと思ったんですけど、そしたらもう富山さんがその昆虫の怪獣が、メガギラスで今やってるからできないって言ったんです。
And my child at the time, my son, he liked insects, so I thought about creating an insect.
カマキラスが好きで。カマキラス
is a giant mantis. That's it.
Yes, he liked mantis, so I thought about creating a monster like that, but I was told that I can't use that because it was already a concept of a different kaiju monster, so I had to think again.
Yeah. My son liked to Kamankiras.
We know.
Not the bad.
Okay, I understand that Mothra and Ghidorah were not your original choices for the movie. Could you talk about that situation a bit?
そうですね、最初はアンギャスとバランス、使いたかったんです。
At first, I wanted to use Anguirus and Baron.
まあそれは最初の、2000年のロサンゼルスの、G フェスタに、来た時に品田冬樹さんがアンギュラスが好きでっていう話をずっと飛行機の中でしてたっていうことが影響してます。
And when I went to G-Fest in Los Angeles in 2000, on the plane I talked with Shinada Fuyuki, and he said that he really liked Anguirus, so that conversation influenced me as well.
でそれでシナリオも作ったんですけれど、その時これから撮影の準備に入ろうかっていう時期に、ゴジラ対メガギラスが公開されてちょっと成績が悪かったので、もうゴジラシリーズは、できないかもしれないっていう話になったんですよ。
But while I was creating the scenario and when we were about to go into filming, the Godzilla movie that came out at the time did not do that well, so there were rumors that Godzilla might die away.
そしてでも富山さんが、トップのね、会長に金子さんがこれもう準備しているんでなんとかやらせてほしいって、言ったらその、トップの会長がねモスラとキングギドラを出しなさいと言ったんです。
But Mr. Tomiyama, he negotiated with the tops of the Toho Studios, saying that Mr. Kaneko had already began his project. He has already come up with the stories and everything, so we can't just stop and we have to go on with creating the kaiju film.
それでその話をこの部屋で、聞かされて、もしかしたら僕は降りるかもしれないと富山さんは思ってたらしいんですけど、降りるっていうかね、監督降りるっていうふうに、思ってたらしいんですけど、そのゴジラとキングギドラとモスラをアンギュラスとバランを変えれば頭の中でそれを考えて、それまでのストーリーを守ってできると思ったんです。
So as they negotiated, I began to think if I swapped Anguirus and Baron with Mothra and King Ghidorah, then they might accept it. So I gave that idea.
だからその時、このキングギドラは宇宙怪獣なのに、この設定でファンは納得するだろうかと。特に名前がキングギドラだから、日本古来の名前じゃないので困ったなと思いながら、でも映画を作る方が重要だと思ってそういうふうに判断しました。
But at the same time, I was kind of reluctant of using King Ghidorah because it's a space monster and it has a little bit of a different concept. So I was hesitant, but to me it was more important to create a kaiju film, so that's why I went on with that plan.
だからそれでキングギドラが 日本の守る怪獣だって言って、怒りませんでしたっていうか、JD は大丈夫でしたって。
Is JD okay with the turnout of the character Ghidorah as the way it was portrayed?
I thought it was very interesting because it's almost as though Mothra and Ghidorah are actors in the movie, and so sometimes they can be the bad monster or Ghidorah, and sometimes they can be the hero or the defender, and so I think it actually made a very interesting twist on the story and something that we hadn't really seen before. I also noticed in the movie, though, that the three defender monsters were not as powerful as they had been in some movies. They didn't have a lot of ray beams, and the Baragon didn't have his flames, and I wondered what was your motivation in trying to make them a little bit weaker than they had been in earlier movies.
ドラゴンは設定からしてすごく小さいゴジラに比べて小さいっていうふうに思ってたので、本当は合成を使ってもっと小さく見せたいなと思ってたんですね。
I was thinking about making the character smaller because the character is smaller than Godzilla. So at first I wanted to create a smaller size. About like an image of a dog.
だけど特撮の神谷監督と話して、そこまで合成でできないということで、小さな人を女の人に入れて小さなスーツにしたんで、すごく撮影の仕方もバラゴンが小さいように、工夫してやるんですね。
But I was told by the special effects director that he wouldn't be able to create CG like that, like create a dog-like image. So instead, they use a small Japanese girl to go into the suit and act as the monster.
だから最初のイメージは犬を蹴っ飛ばすみたいにバーンと蹴っ飛ばしてキャーンっていうみたいな感じにしたら。
At first, I wanted to create something like kicking a dog and it goes flying, like screaming.
神谷さんがかなり愛情を持って、バラゴンを、演出しているうちにすごく時間かかって、いきましたね。
But the special effects director, he began to really form a love towards the character Baron, and it became a lot more interesting and like realistic.
だからその特撮のスタジオの方ではバラゴンがかわいそうかかわいいとそういう言葉が聞こえていて。
And then I heard rumors from the tokusatsu area, the tokusatsu field, yes, that they really like the character and it looks cute. Like Baron looks very cute, and sometimes Baragon, sorry, it looks very cute, and they really like the character that they created.
その時間かかりすぎたって箱根のそのシーンがゴジラとバラゴンの戦いがね、時間かかりすぎたことがその後神谷 監督が東宝で、なかなか仕事ができなくなった原因なんです。
But then, due to the use of the character Baragon, the special effects director afterwards he found it difficult to work in Toho Studios. He had a lot of difficulties.
だからまた神谷さんをGフェストに呼んであげてほしいですね。
So that is why I would like for G-Fest to invite him here one day.
Paragon did not make it to the final battle. I wondered if you ever thought that maybe all three of the monsters should engage in the final battle.
So ですね。まあそこでこうゴジラに光線で、消滅されたっていうそのゴジラの凶悪さを、残すためにこうちょっとイメージだけだけが現れるっていうふうにしました。
I made it that so that only the image of the Baragon would appear. I wanted to create Godzilla as a very strong, undefeatable monster.
Okay, so that you needed to make an example of Paragon to show that Godzilla would really go all the way and finish him off. I see, very good, okay.
その本当のことを言うと、自分は子供の時一番好きだったのはキングギドラだったんで。
Truthfully speaking, when I was a child, my favorite character was King Ghidorah.
それで三大怪獣地球最大の決戦のキングギドラのイメージをその GMK のゴジラに重ねたっていうところなんですね。
And I overlapped the three big monsters in GMK, and yes, that is what I wanted to do.
というさっき言わせたことです。
As I mentioned earlier.
Well, I try not to hog all of the question time, although I have more, but I'd like to ask if anybody in the audience would like to ask a question. Let's start over there, sure.
I think one of the most incredible moments in GMK is when the students and the teacher are staring out the window at the mushroom cloud. Oh, thank you. One of the most incredible moments of GMK are when the students and the teacher are staring out the window at the mushroom cloud. What was it like to film a scene that had such historical significance?
.まあゴジラには日本人の、その戦争に原爆で、災害を受けたっていうイメージが重なっていると思うんですね。でどうしてもそのゴジラのイメージと原爆のイメージを重ねたかったっていうそういう意味ですね。
I am sure many people, when they think of Godzilla, they think about the connection with the nuclear bomb and the tragedies that occurred because of it. And so I wanted to portray that connection again in the film.
Thank you.
I was just curious, if you direct another Godzilla film, what would you like to do with the character, and what type of bow would you like for him to fight Foe at all, or?
The question was if Kaneko-san were to direct another Godzilla movie, what would he like to do with the character, and what kind of foe would he like to see Godzilla fight?
やっぱり、そうですね、ゴジラと、ガメラは、戦わなきゃいけないんじゃないかとは思ってるんですけど、そうなかなか難しい問題がありますよね。
I really do want to have Godzilla and Gamera fight against each other, but there are difficulties in creating that.
簡単にはできない。
But it's not easy.
There is a scene in GMK where Godzilla begins to absorb Ghidorah's lightning. Was that a reference to the Heisei Gamera trilogy? Because it's very similar to the scene where he absorbs the fire and then blasts Gauss's head off, or was it just original and that was a coincidence?
まあその時はギドラが、その光線を吸収して大きくなるけど、さらにそれを上回ることをゴジラがやるっていうふうにしたわけです。
I created something where Godzilla gets the power from King Ghidorah through the lightning, but I wanted to create something bigger, like he gets even more powerful because of it.
まあだからこうやったらさらにそれを上回ることをやらなきゃいけないっていうことなんですね。
So we always need to strive for better, bigger and better. So getting more power and then becoming more powerful and keep on striving for bigger and better.
Regarding the almost pacifist nature of GMK, were there any particular films of Ishiro Honda that served as inspiration?
GMK についてそうですね、父親が潜水艇に乗るシーンなんかは、その前にこう、渡辺裕之さんと話すシーンなんかは日本の薬剤映画にあるような場面なんです。
The scenes with Watanabe Hiroyuki, those were influenced by many of the Yakuza movies that I watched in the past.
まあ家族の会話とかは日本の伝統的な家族ドラマなんかにも影響を受けていると思いますね。
And the conversations that the families would have in the movies, those were also inspired by many of the family movies that are in Japan.
まあお父さんが、歴史の話をすると娘がこう聞いても聞こえなかったりするっていうことがありますから。
Yes, because in the household, many times the father would talk about wars, but the daughter would not even listen. So those type of like scenes are oftentimes represent how the Japanese families really are.
Do you consider that GMK carried a message of pacifism?
パスリズムが
Anti-war.
アンティオール、そうですね、アンティオールははい、ちょうど撮影終わって、編集の時に9.11事件が起きたんでびっくりして似てるところがあるからっていうことで驚いたんですけど、映画自体はこう戦争に対しての、反戦のメッセージを入れたつもりです。
When the filming and editing ended for the film, at that time, the 9/11 had just occurred, and that was something that, like, I felt that the movie does portray an anti-war message, and I felt that it was very timely.
Yes.
I have two questions. Number one, how did you personally develop your anti-war beliefs? And number two, what do you think about the recent Godzilla movies like Shin Godzilla and King of Monsters?
自分、父親が反戦運動家だったこともありますし、子供の頃から戦争はいけないことだっていうふうに、ずっと思って育ってきました。
My father was an anti-war activist, and he had always told me that war is wrong, and that is how he raised me with teaching me that war is not a good thing, it should not happen.
で、2番目の質問はちょっと難しいかな。いっぱいありすぎて一つにならないというか。
And the rest, there are too many things that I can't just say like simply here. It's too much. It's too long to say here.
シン・ゴジラは日本のCGI の技術のちょっと限界っていうかあんまり動いてないんですよね、ゴジラが。動かない。だからそう動かないゴジラを作ることが、クオリティが保たれるということになってると思うんですよ。だから戦いがCG で、戦いをするのはちょっと難しいんですよね、今のこの技術と経済状態です。
In regards to Shin Godzilla, the Japanese, because of the Japanese monetary budgets, like they can't use a lot of money for creating films, and also because of the not like the the CGI, it's not that advanced compared to, for example, America. So it was difficult to create a lot of movement in Godzilla, which is why they created Godzilla to be like more still, and that way they would be able to uphold its image and its quality.
それに、反してキングオブモンスターは過剰なCGI で、その見てる怪獣バトルだけ見てると楽しいんですけど、もうちょっと減らしてもいいんじゃないかなと思うんですよね。
On the other hand, in regards to King of Monsters, the CGI is amazing and very intense, but I feel that it could be a little bit less.
キングオブモンスターの5分の1ぐらいの予算いただければ面白くできるんじゃないかなと思うんですけどね、私は。
I believe that if they give even just 1/5 of the amount of money they use for King of Monsters, I would be able to create a good movie.
キングオブモンスターちょっと多すぎないですかね。
King of Monsters uses a bit too much CGI.
でもやっぱりね、作ってる時は、アメリカンプロデューサーはそういう競争ですからね。スパイダーマンに勝つためにはとかいろいろ考えていると思うんですよね。
But because the industry is very competitive, I'm sure that the producers and the director, they wanted to create something that would win over Spider-Man and those type of other movies.
だからもう多分もう不安なんでもっともっとっていうふうに言うんじゃないかなと思う。
So in my speculation, I think that King of Monsters uses a lot of intense movement in CGI because to cover up their worry about being able to overcome other types of hero movies.
だからとりあえず3匹ぐらいでやればよかったなと思うんですけど。
Maybe they should have just stuck with 3 monsters.
Skip.
Do you have any memories of working with Hideo Yamamoto?
いやGMK 以外にも2本やってもらっててすごく、しっかりした方でした。
I worked with him on 2 other projects besides GMK, and he is a very diligent and hardworking person.
で頃はスペインに、こだわりを持ってていろんな衣装帽子とかはスペインで買ったもんだとか自分でも決めてました。
And he had a lot of props and items from Spain. He had been in Spain at the time.
それで自分はスペインで行ってスペインで死ぬんだって言ってたんですけどね。
He said, "I will die in Spain."
それと自分がもっと若かったらアフガニスタンに行ってアメリカと戦うんだって言ってました。
And he said, if I was a little bit younger, then I would go to Afghanistan and fight with America.
I think we have time for, 1 or 2 more questions. So how about the gentleman in the red hat on the aisle? Keep it shorter for Andy.
Hi, my question is, a lot of people, myself included, consider GMK to be one of the very best Godzilla movies ever made. So I was wondering, just how do you feel knowing that most of the Godzilla fan base considers GMK to be one of the very best of the entire franchise?
いや、自分は全力を、尽くしましたが、他の、作品も、それぞれいいところがあると思います。
I did my very best in creating GMK, but the other movies, they all have their great points.
でまあ、ファーストゴジラをリスペクトして、それの、続編というつもりで作ったんで、他のその歴史を、がないという、そういう世界なんですね。
And I wanted to create something in respects to the very first Godzilla. So there are a lot of like historical backgrounds, but it also does not include many of the other aspects of different Godzilla movies.
でもまあそう言っていただけるのは嬉しいですけど。
But I am so happy that for that comment, for what you said.
One more? Sure, how about we go to the...
Thank you. First off, I love GMK. It's one of my favorites. And being like a big fan of Godzilla, I remember seeing the movie and at first being a little, taken aback at how villainous he was portrayed in the movie. Like he's the blatant bad guy. And I was curious, how was it in Japan? Like the response there? Was there a backlash about, wow, how, what a villain he really was portrayed as? Thank you.
その時は、そのメガギラス、その前の年のメガギラスの何倍か、3倍ぐらいヒットしたんですけど、その理由は、ある一部では同時上映の「とっとこハム太郎」がだっていう人もいますけど、知ってます？とっとこハム太郎、とっとこハム太郎って知らないの？
It did 3 times better than the previous year's movie. It was really good.
とっとこハム太郎を見に来てた小さい子が GMK 見て泣いてしまうっていうことが結構あったんですよ。
And there was a famous actor in that particular film, the GMK. So many children were very interested in coming to watch, but when they watched, they cried what happened to him in the movie.
それで途中からポスターが、貼られて、ご注意くださいっていうポスターが貼られまして、とっとこハム太郎を見に来たお客さんはゴジラはちょっと刺激が強いのでご注意くださいっていう、ポスターが貼られて。
And as the movie began to be screened, they put up a poster saying, children, please beware of what will happen to the character
Hamtaro, I think we're...
Yeah. Godzilla is very scary.
So you're saying it was an odd pairing of movies for a children's movie, and then a scary Godzilla movie may not have been the most logical.
did you have the chance to see Hamotaro?
Some of us maybe have.
でその時の、お土産っていうかね、映画見たお客さんへのグッズっていうのがあって、それはハム太郎をゴジラが加えてるっていうグッズがある。
And after the movie, we would sell a product where Godzilla is kind of like biting into the head.
No, I think it was like a Hamtaro, which is a little cartoon hamster, but inside the Gojira suit with the face peeking out of the mouth. Right? That's what you're talking about. Yeah. And so, an interesting combination. I'm afraid we're out of time. I would like to thank all of you for not only for doing this with us, but also for making such memorable and important contributions to our favorite genre.
Thank you very much.